Assalamualaikum, salam sejahtera, and good day. Very good afternoon to everyone. Right, so welcome to our National Competitive Webinar Series 2021. I'm Farid, I will be the moderator for the session. And with us, we have our coach, I call him coach now, Mr. Isaac, CEO of People Performance, who's going to actually discuss with us this interesting topic about problem solving and decision making for high performing team. I would like to welcome Mr. Isaac to the session. Hi Isaac again, officially. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much, Dr. Farid. I'm enjoying our sessions for this our third session, yeah.
Yeah, I think this is the continuation of the past two sessions, where the first session we talk about talent and productivity, and then the second session we actually have a very good discussion about the high performing organization, the culture behind it. And then I think this is the continuation where we are going to actually in depth on problem solving and decision making. So I think we will talk about at any level, executives, engineers, managers. So one of the key tools behind the competency is a problem solving.
That's right.
And at the leadership level, decision making is a job, and that is a job. I think this is going to be very challenging, and I think we are eager to listen from Mr. Isaac about this. So without further ado, I would like to just pass the session to our coach here, Mr. Isaac Peter. Over to you, Isaac.
Thank you very much, Dr. Farid, and welcome everybody to this session. So this is our third session, right? And this time it's just 3 o'clock. The rest was all at 10 a.m. So thank you very much for coming to today's session. And let me just give you a bit introduction for those who are joining for the first time. For those who have joined us previously, just bear with me, right? So this is a bit about me. I run a consulting business called People Performance. It's a learning and organizational development. So when we talk about organizational development, we talk about internal competencies, which is why in the first sessions, we talk a lot about talent development. In second, we talk about culture. Today, we talk about team. And next week, I'll be talking about leadership. So if you think about it, all of these are very intertwined, just like how a gear within a tool or an equipment works together. So that's what I do. Today, we're going to talk about team development. I just share with you some of the team programs I work both in Malaysia and Singapore. And it's interesting, different teams, there are differences, partly because of the people and partly the culture. And I will go into a bit different. At the same time, I want to share the way we do talent program or team program, we have actually broken it down. One of the things I notice whenever people talk about team is team building, right? So we come from a perspective that there's no such thing as a one size fits all. So we've actually broken down our team resources or team services into 3, which is the team play, team learn, and team strategize. In today's session, when I'm talking about high performing team, I'll be focusing a fair bit on what we call the team learn kind of content, right? So the focus is a lot more into how do we work together, and that falls under our services called team learn. Now, today's session, I'm just mindful once again of timing because we do tend to go overboard. And while that may happen, please do ask your questions. The challenge with running today's session is we come from very different backgrounds. There are about 70 people on this session, and you come from different backgrounds. Some come from services, some come from government agencies, some come from product or manufacturing. So obviously, when you are coming here, you are wanting to look for maybe an answer. Now, the way I'm going to run today's session is I'm going to share in terms of broad frameworks of how do you do decision making and problem solving in a team setting, and really in terms of how do you bring back to the workplace. And you have any other additional things, message me and ask me questions. What are we going to do over the next 1 hour? Firstly is to recognize working in team is the way forward. Working in team is no more just a good to have or we do it because people want it. I'm going to share with you a very strong business case of why working in team is the way for organization to go. And if your organization is not doing that, why you need to start thinking about that. Then we're going to talk about understand how to form a high performing team. It's interesting. I've always kind of do this short test with people. When they say we need a high performing team, my question to them is, what does that mean? And people get stuck. So today we want to be able to put some kind of, give some clarity in terms of what it means to be a high performing team. And I will share with you in terms of some of the characteristics of a high performing team. We at People Performance have developed our own framework of a high performing team, which we have tested and we have built an assessment around it, right? Then I'm going to share with you Ishikawa diagram, or some of you would know it as the fishbone diagram. It's probably the most basic, the easiest tool, but yet one of the most powerful tools. I will not talk about the latest decision-making models because there's so many in the market, but I'll focus on Ishikawa, and it's going to give you a very strong foundation on problem solving. Then we're going to talk about importance of conversation decision-making. Now, if would you agree with me? A lot of things, a lot of tools, techniques that we're coming up today is really to make sure that we get right answers or want certainty, and we try to minimize talking because many of us would say when we have conversation or miscommunication problem leads to problem, right? Now, what's important is as a high performing team, you'll start to notice having conversation, not just any conversation, but functional, productive, high functioning conversation is critical in solving problems. And we're going to show that as we go through this whole route. And finally, using a weighted decision making matrix. One of the biggest challenge in decision making in teams is the sense of biasness or the sense of unfairness. And whenever you detect some sense of unbiased or whenever you detect some sense of unfairness, the tendency if you just keep quiet and you just go with the flow. Now, the weighted decision making I would say it's a very simple tool, but it's powerful enough to create a sense of fairness, a sense where everybody says, I'm willing to be part of this. So I'm going to share with that as we go through. I'm breaking down this presentation into 3 points. The workplace reality today. So that's going to focus in terms of the workplace environment today. Let's not talk about what it used to be. Let's not talk about how may happen. Let's talk about the workplace today. Then we're going to talk about construct of a high-performing team. So I'm going to share with you characteristics. And finally, we're going to talk about problem solving in teams. Right. So I'm just bringing out these 3 major broad categories. Right. So very quick. And once again, please get your phone ready. I'm going to get you guys to give some feedback to Menti after this. Yeah. The workplace reality today, if you think about it, businesses are shaped by consumers' demand and wants, which means that in today's context, in order for you to stay relevant, you need to keep up with what customer wants. Gone were the days of Henry Ford. Henry Ford had this one very famous statement. It goes something like this: you can have a car in any color as long as it is black. And I found that statement to be very interesting because in the past, businesses control consumers by telling consumers what they can have. But because today the people are spoiled for options, people are spoiled for choices, therefore the world has turned around. Businesses need consumers, and therefore businesses will start to change, right? In our previous session, when we talk about organization culture, I shared with you in terms of speed and change and of what's going to happen. And once again, today, the whole idea of working in team is because these are the 2 key drivers in any industry, even in government sectors. Speed, that means how fast things gets done, as well as agility. Agility talks about being fluid. Today we are moving to the left, tomorrow we turn, maybe we take 1 step back. So that talks about agility or agile. And you think about it, agile is one of the buzzwords today in organization. Now, think about it. You want to be able to go fast. You also want to be agile, right? So this is where team comes in because teams are smaller units. And if you think about it, smaller units allows for this to move around, right? So think about it, a big ocean liner versus a small speedboat. An ocean liner, yes, you can take a lot of people, but in order to make a change of direction, it takes a much longer curve in order to make a U-turn. But a small speedboat can do it very fast. So one of the things why teams is becoming very crucial in high functioning organization is firstly, teams respond faster to changes in the workplace. You can always disassemble and assemble new teams and start working. Whereas you want to change department, it takes a longer process because that goes with the organization strategy. So instead of working in departments context, teams are being formed to very quickly address issues. That's one. Secondly, minimize disruption to the business. If you're going to do reorg, every time when there's a change, you're going to do a reorg, right? Then what happens is the organization gets bogged down with change management and actually doing their own work. By having teams, you still get the organization move forward, and you set up side teams to be able to focus on some of the changes. And then once they're complete, introduce back to the businesses. And that's why it actually minimizes. Now, the other thing, then the third point, highly motivating to team members. Now, what's interesting in this, I've been running workshops, I've been doing team development since 2007. And what's interesting is whenever we put a challenge, team actually thrive. But for some reason in organization, we feel that people don't like challenge. And therefore, sometimes as team leaders, we try to minimize it. As you go into team, especially high functioning team, you realize team thrives on challenges. So by putting them in a situation where they have to come up with new ways of thinking, new way of doing, it becomes a highly motivating environment where you are working in team. And finally, teams are goal driven. Now, that means whenever you set up a team, it is very clear for a specific purpose. The minute you complete it, you move out. So let me share with you, for example, when I was working in a consulting outfit in Singapore, the way we work is whenever there's a new project, it's a situation where the directors will bring up to all of us and say, who's interested to be part of the project? They will share with us the project scope and what's going on. And then we get to choose whether we want to be part of the project. So in that context, what's beautiful is we are very clear about what we need, and it's something whether is this project aligned to our purposes. So this is the reality of it. Now, if you are the photo I put, A team is my generation. I was growing up. This was the A team I enjoyed. And if you think about it, a team is kind of just give a brief definition, right? A team is a group of individuals working together to achieve their goal. So once again, it's a common goal. If you think about it in the workplace, we have two kinds of team. We have functional teams, which is working in departments. So if you're HR, we call it the HR team. If you are in manufacturing, we call it manufacturing team. But there's another team that we are focusing. And when I'm talking about high performing, while it is possible for functional teams to be high performing, most of the time, high performing teams are what we call self-managing teams, right? Now, what's the difference? Functional team, the focus on individual goal, which means I work in the department. So let's say HR, I work in HR, but I have my own KPI, right? Now, question is, do I know my department KPI? One question, do I need to know? And the answer is not necessary. As long as I hit my KPI, I get my promotion, I get my rewards, I get my bonuses, I get my incentives. That's one. Now, when it comes to self-managing team, and this could be in the sense of a cross-functional team, and this cross-functional teams usually happen when organizational based project comes about, then you have to get people from different teams. That's one. The other will be ad hoc teams. So, for example, quality circles, quality improvement projects where you have small teams working. Now, those are what we call self-managed teams. And a lot of what I'll be talking today is focusing on self-managed teams, right? So that's where we're coming from. All right, so let's start with this. And as I started with just now, right? What do you mean by high-performing team? So for this, let's go over to Menti. So please go to menti.com, key in the code. The code is 3673935. And I would like you to be able to answer this question. What are the differences between a normal team and a high-performing team? Now, I want to hear your opinion. I want to hear your thoughts on it. Not what other people are saying, but what you think about it, right? So in this situation, once again, your response is anonymous. So nobody knows who is keying in the answer. So please do key in your answer because I would like us to be able to have a look at this. Now, I put some hints over here. It's not important, but I think just for some of us who need a bit of nudging, right? So let me go over to that side to see your responses. But go to menti.com, key in the code 3673935.
Right. I hope the participants can try to put in some thought on the questions, and we will actually go through and see and actually give some opinion on that. While waiting for some response, maybe Mr. Isaac, one thing, we talk about the agile structure or agile team. I think nowadays we can still see a rigid kind of structure is also applied in organization. There must be a pro and cons of having a rigid structure as well as having an agile kind of structure. What do you think about that?
So perhaps Dr. Farid, when you say a rigid structure, could you share a bit more the meaning of rigid structure from your perspective?
Yeah, maybe we have a very specific task, and then we actually have assigned rigid kind of departments, and then they just work inside the departments, talking within themselves, and then they have their own KPI rather than work actually cross to the other departments. So that is just rigid like that, and then they have their KPI, they have their own bosses, they just make themselves happy, reach the KPI, that's it. compared to when you have agile, where you can cross function or you can create your own team and solve a problem and so on.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thanks. All right. So very quickly to answer that, right? So you have to go back into industrial revolution, and therefore I actually think engineering is the greatest job in the world, but no, I'm just biased towards that. So if you look at industrial revolution, when the reason why we had departments and all started because people needed to collate or organize work. And also when you have rigid departments, what happened? I mean, I don't know whether rigid is the one, but what I call maybe a nicer word would say well-defined work function, right? Well-defined function. The idea is to be able to collate things within those functions, so we are able to measure things properly. We are able to clearly define where the boundaries. Because if you want to measure anything, you need to know where the boundaries. So I think that was why it happened. Now we need to remember in the industrial revolution days, change is very slow. Because why? Businesses control what customers can have. And therefore, businesses were not pressured to change very fast. So organizing work by function became the most obvious way to go about it. Because why? Firstly, people are staying longer the jobs. There wasn't a need for cross-functional work because because the management was the one that does the sowing of seeds across department. Now, obviously, the problem with a problem with a departmental approach is you create what we call a silo mentality. Why? Because if I'm only working in production, I have no idea what's going on with quality. I have no idea what's going on in warehouse. All I know is if it's, let's say, procurement is not getting product in, I will see procurement as a problem maker because they are not bringing in. And what happens with the functional approach is things become a bit more adversarial when something goes wrong. Why? Now, one of the management guru talks about, what gets measured gets done. So once you start doing a functional approach, your measurement is based on your department. Your measurement is not based at the organizational level. And therefore, people start becoming territorial in that sense. Now, fast forward to today where speed is very fast and the focus is no more about producing a product. The focus is a lot more about satisfied customers. And therefore, getting members to talk across departments becomes more important. Why? Because it's faster. If you don't, then you have to wait for senior leaders to do it. So, but it's also interesting. The reason of functions is focusing a lot on control. So a lot of command and control is required. While we are working in teams, it's no more about command and control. It's a lot about facilitating productivity, right? So a key driver to move from functional to team is speed and change. So that's the main driver of it.
Okay, we have a lot of opinion here about the differences between normal team and high performing team.
Great. So let's look at a few of them, right?
Yes.
So high performing teams have better communication, trust, cooperation, engagement. Now that's true. So I will share with you today, at least from a humanistic perspective, why this is important. And this is the irony. We all can agree that communication is important, but sometimes we are trying to use a lot of tools and apps and all to communicate. So I'm going to bring us back to the fundamental of the importance of communication. So this is a very good point. Normal teams are led by managers. High performing teams are led by leaders. Great. So once again, we recognize the differences, right? Just very quickly, between the word managers and leaders, if you think about it, a job of a manager is to stabilize things. A job of a leader is to rock the boat. And the whole idea of rocking the boat is so that you generate better ideas. So there is some truth in this, but recognize this, in today's context, a manager is also required to lead. So that means a manager has to pick up the skills of leadership.
I find it interesting here, Isaac. I used to hear that there is a difference between a boss and a leader.
Yeah.
You have something to say about that?
So once again, when we say a boss, we talk about managers. Now think about it, especially for us who came out in production era. A manager's job focuses on minimizing risk, and the only way to minimize risk is to focus on what works, which means you stabilize the system. Now, when a system is stabilized, it becomes static, it doesn't move. So therefore, a leader's job is to destabilize the system so that the system as a whole move forward. And because change is becoming so constant, right, you need to always move forward. So that is why leaders are required today. The problem with leadership is it is constantly creating uncomfortableness in organization. So that's what happens. Yeah. High performing team, happy teams where we can create creativity, innovative ideas, not waiting for instruction. Great. They are independent but best team. Now, so this you are talking about self-directed team or what self-management team. And this is interesting. Now, it may not be, in my opinion, it may not be a happy team, but it is going to be a very highly satisfying working in such teams. And I'll talk later where the shift of a high performing team, there's a shift from focus on relationship to focus on goals, right?
But I think this one also depends on the leadership, right?
Meaning?
Meaning to say, if the leadership is tend to actually have a very rigid way, one-way communication, you listen to me. So I
Yeah,
think, the subordinates will tend like, okay, that is what the boss is saying. That's it, right? They don't want to actually innovate and have a
exactly.
creative discussion.
Great. Yeah, you're right. And therefore, that's the normal team. So a high performing team goes beyond that. So I'm also going to share afterwards as we go through this. A high performing team requires leaders who are willing to take risk, right? Normal team produce low quality and services, high level of trust among members. And this is another part we're going to talk about trust. So what is trust? And I will try my best to define it in a simple but applicable, actionable way in the workforce, right? Normal team works together to achieve goal. High performing teams, they collaborate, innovate, produce work. Great. And one of the things that we talk about is about transparency. How do you create transparency? How do you share in a way that people are okay? Because if you think about it, one of the common denomination with a common factor in the Asian culture is we try not to offend people, and we try not, the main one is we try not to offend people, and therefore sometimes we keep quiet, right? What else? In contrast, wow, okay, so there's a lot of inputs here, and we talk about common goals, quality. Now, quality of outcome, I thought this is important. Now, a normal team can also produce results. Let's not forget that. We are not saying that normal team is not good. What we are saying, a normal team does what is required, whereas a high-performing team usually goes above and beyond to produce excellent results. That's one. Secondly, in a high-performing team, right, they don't stop just because there's a problem. They actually find a way to innovate around it, right? Complacency and continuous growth. Now, this is interesting. So that's the reason why I separated between functional teams and self-managing teams. In a functional team, like working in a department, after a while, right, complacency here means we just do whatever is in the process. We don't go beyond that. We don't really need to innovate. We only innovate when something goes wrong. In a high-performing team, even when things are going well, people are constantly finding ways to make it better. So those are some of the contrasts that we have.
I guess
Okay.
it's something to do with the Kaizen spirit, right? Continuous
Yes.
improvement
So
spirit.
Kaizen, you're right. It's continuous improvement. Now, so for example, even you're talking about Kaizen, doctor, you think about it, there are two parts. There are Kaizen tools. There are also what we call the Kaizen philosophy, or what they call the spirit, right? Which is really about culture of doing Kaizen. You can have the tools, but without the spirit, you realize the improvement will not be leaps and bounds because the spirit of it is not there. So you look at the Japanese, right? Even the manager walking on the production floor, if he sees a piece of rubbish, he will take and throw. He doesn't tell the supervisor to throw it. He does it himself. And that's what we talk about the Kaizen spirit. People embody the whole thing.
Yeah.
Great. So thank you very much for sharing this. Um, let's go back to our slide, and let me take it over from there. Right.
Right.
So thank you
And
very much for all the comments. And so far, I'm happy to see the comments that you are able to distinguish the differences, right? And level of involvement. I think one of the things that I thought that perhaps I don't add on is level of involvement. In a normal team, involvement is by appointment. I mean, I need you to do this. In a high performing team, right? All you need to do is say, who wants to do this? And people will say, boss, I don't mind doing that. People actually volunteer themselves. That to me is a major part of it, right? So if I'm looking at it, is a highly functional and highly performing team is one where members' key focus is on the result instead of the relationship, and not the other way around. So let me kind of clarify this, because a lot of us have the mindset that relationship in the team is important. Yes, relationship is important, but strengthening the relationship is actually a byproduct of us working towards results, right? So that's kind of just take that for a moment, and I will share with you what I mean by that. Now, before I share this point, so let me just share some clarity point. If we realize today people are not staying in jobs for too long, after 3 years, people may move out of job. Imagine if you're in a team where the focus is on relationship, right? So, which means if you stay on, you are viewed as loyal, and therefore, we build friendship. We go makan together. I go for your daughter's birthday and all. Now that's focus on relationship. A team that's focused like that finds change disruptive to the team, which means whenever there's a new member change, people get frustrated. Wherever the organization change, people get very team members get very demoralized because when organization change, it affects the relationship, right? Now, compared to when the focus on results, where people come in very clear that we are in this team because we need to achieve this goal. And as you work towards the goal, you realize relationship building becomes a necessity. In the first approach where focus is on relationship, the focus is because we are strong, we have good relationship, we can work. That may sound correct, but a lot of the team studies have shown this may not work. Instead, the focus on results. That means we need to achieve the results. If we don't, we all look bad. If we don't, the team is a failure. And therefore, we actually see relationship as a necessity to achieve the result. So that is the fundamental difference. So let me kind of share with you a few pointers. And if you agree, disagree, ask questions, go ahead. When you're talking focus on relationships, senior members tend to get their way. Because why? The longer you are in a relationship context, the longer you are means you're more loyal, and therefore certain rights and privileges are given to you. So senior members tend to get their way. Those who talk the louder get their way. Now, harmony over results. So in a team that focuses on relationship, people don't offend each other. So sometimes even you may have a good idea, right? You may keep quiet because it's against your leader's ideas, or it may be against your other team members' idea, and you don't want to rub them the wrong way. So maybe somebody said something, and if you say it, it's going to be the opposite. So you don't want that. So you rather have the harmony than actually push towards a better result. Now, tend to protect team members instead of addressing issues. In a team that focuses on relationship, because if you think about it, relationship is linked to face value. So whenever another team comment, or maybe the CEO or anyone in the organization make comment about the team, the tendency is you guys don't know what you're talking about. You don't understand what we are difficulty. There's a tendency to protect the team, protect the member. And when you spend effort protecting, you may actually be close to feedback or valid concerns the organization has towards your team, right? Because why? You're protecting everybody. Now view the team as their own, because the team is the relationship. When an organization change, what happens? Priority gets changed, which means maybe now I have to take back resource. Last time you have 1 million, now I need to revise your budget to 500,000. Now, if you're focused on relationship, what happens is whenever there's a revise in budget, everybody has to work harder, and then also now we have to crack our head harder. We have to change the way we work, right? We have to replan, which means we are creating a lot of uncomfortableness. And therefore, it's easy to see the organization as making things difficult for the team, right? Because we view our team as us. So, and this is very dangerous, especially today, things are moving fast. Now, follow procedure. So because we don't want to offend, we just follow procedure. If say I'm supposed to get something from the department and I follow procedure and the answer is cannot, I just stop there because I don't offend anybody. So not offending people become very big in a team that focuses on relationship. And because of that, because of relationship, you will find members take things very personally. That is what happens when the focus of the team is on relationship. Now, once again, I need to be very clear. I'm not saying relationship is not important. I'm saying when relationship becomes the focus. Now, compared to focus on results, and this is where a high-performing team thrives, right? The best idea gets picked, which means what? Every member needs to be given permission to speak. Even the one that's not popular, every member, because the best idea wins. Now, because of that, team members have to learn how to communicate better. They need to find a way to sell their ideas. They need to find a way to articulate their thoughts so that people see exactly what they're talking about. That's one. Now, team result over individual interest. One of the things people don't like change is because either they have to do more work or they have to do other things. So we tend to keep quiet because we want to do extra work. Now, in a high-performing team, people want better results for the team. And therefore, they are willing to make adjustments. They are willing to say, don't worry, I'll help you, because team result become more important. And this is where high-performing team excel. They view team result, team goal first before their personal goals. And I've seen some teams behaving this way a lot. Open to feedback and critical. Now, people tell they will change. View organization as part of view the team as part of the organization. Now, in a high-performing team, there is a clear setup. There's a clear expectation that this team is here because of the organization. This team is to support the organization. So if the organization change, the team record, while it may be difficult, the team will change with it because they understand why the organization needs to do. Which means one of the things the team leader needs to do whenever a budget is being taken away is to actually find out why and communicate to the team, as well as tell the team that I know this is frustrating, but we need to change. Then last one, complete the task. So in a high-performing team, right, if when they follow the procedure and the job doesn't get done, they will find a way around it without breaking the rules, but they will find a way around it. And that's where a high-performing team leverages relationship in the organization. Though they work in a team, they leverage relationship in the organization. So I have seen team members who literally make friends with the CEO's PA so that they can have information that will be beneficial to the team. And finally, members are professional. Now, in a high-functioning team, where the focus on the results, we are different. We may not get along well because we have different value system, but we will work together because at the end of the day, I want to benefit as much as you do. So I may not like you, but I will work with you because the team goal is more important. So this is where the fundamental shift happens. And this is something that I'm doing. I'm really working hard with teams to realize relationship important, but relationship shouldn't be the goal.
And I find it very interesting here. It seems like it is quite challenging to strike a balance between having good relationship and result oriented, meaning to say get things done. So maybe if I'm a manager in a company and organization, how do I create a team in such a way that it is result oriented, however the relationship is actually good among them and myself?
Yeah. Okay, so for one thing, we need to recognize now, the Malaysian culture is a highly relational culture. So by that definition, right, we tend to be more protective of relationships than the result. So sometimes you hear people say, Allah, we have tried. No, we have tried. That means the focus is on effort because that is relationship. We don't talk about the results. Now, how do you do this? I think partly is for people to realize that when you're working in an organization, you're working in a particular context and you need to know what works. For example, if you're playing soccer, you must abide by soccer rules. You can't follow the rugby rules in a soccer match. Likewise, when you are working in an organization, you must understand the rules of the organization. So like when I train managers, especially new managers, one of the things that we do fundamentally to shift them from focus on relationship to focus on result is by getting them to understand the ecosystem within an organization, as well as understand what are the levers that they can use. So for example, one of the key skills that we work with leaders in order to do this is to recognize what we call building networks in organization, where you build relationship that will be helpful to your job, right? Some people may say, hey, that's like plain politics, but that is the function of it.
So it's not a true friendship. It's just for the sake of get things done.
And
that's how I.
Yeah, okay. It's that sounds negative, but in a way, that is the system that we are working in, right? Like for example, people always talk about loyalty to company, but my question is, in a situation where a company is in a difficulty, the company's loyalty is to the company first, right? It's likewise. And I will go into more details of it in our next session, where we talk about a shift from loyalty to mutual benefits. So a leader needs to be very clear instead of just saying relationship important. Yes, relationship is important. For example, between you and I, at the end of the day, let's say we are put in a situation where, remember the reality TV Survivor? At the end of the day, everybody is nice, but when you need to get somebody out, everybody starts to protect themselves. So that's where we need to be very clear when we're in organization. It is about getting the result because The game of the organization is this: if you achieve the result, the organization will develop you further. It sounds harsh, but that's the fact of the matter, right?
Mr. Isaac, we have two questions. I think question number one from Hisham, Mr. Hisham.
Okay.
I think it's about something to do with the resources.
Okay.
Normally, people will cross division if their unit has no budget. If their unit already have budget or project to do, normally people will not cross division. I think something to do with the resources of the organization.
Correct.
The second question is that from Nancy Jones.
Yeah.
How a member can persuade a leader or manager to shift from normal team to high performance team? In constructing a team, is it possible for a member to construct high performance team when the manager or leader of the team unable to do so?
Okay, so let me start with Hisham's first. Now, when I talk about normal people will cross division, so I will do Hisham first, then after Nancy. So people will cross division if their unit has no budget. Now, so one of the things is this, and this is where it's important to ask. This is where the relationship is important. The relationship is important. So, for example, I don't have budget. Your department has budget. Now, if we are friends, or we have good relationship, that's why I can say, hey, I need your help. This is what we need to acquire. I don't have a budget. Can your, if you have excess fund meaning that you've got everything you want, can you purchase it on our behalf? So this again, people may say, Isaac, but that's not right. And this is where we talk, when in a high performing team, we go beyond the rules because we do recognize system and rules do have limitation. And a high performing team goes beyond that. So in a high performing team, leaders do not focus on, and this can be a bit sensitive, leaders do not focus on right and wrong. Leaders focus on useful or not useful. So when we say about building relationship, it is about building relationship that will help the work and the project that we work on, right? So for example, and some of you may have been in a situation where you realize the budget is low for department, but they still get things done. Because why? I don't have budget, but I can always use the goodwill of other department to help me to get things done. Or even borrow equipment from other department. Because why? I don't have budget, so I can borrow. Now, if the other department and you are not close, guess what? They may not be keen to lend you the equipment because they are fearful you may not be appreciative. So that's where the whole networking thing comes in, right? Nancy asked, can member persuade a manager to shift from normal to the one? Now, a lot of this focuses on mindset shift. So when we run our leadership program, a key component is you need to shift the mindset, which means, as what I just shared just now, shifting the focus on relationship to result is very key. Once the mindset shift, it is easy for managers to switch. That's one. Secondly, is to recognize the local culture. So I will continue to share this. Go and check out Hofstede's cultural dimension. You'll notice the Malaysian culture is very relational, which means we don't question, we don't push. Because why? We don't want to offend people. Now, if you are able to recognize that, then two things will happen. Firstly, you need to be able to start developing leaders who will be able to embody this approach. The challenge, obviously, is their managers may be more the old school where focus on relationship. One of the things that I work with leaders is you need to be willing to take the risk. That means you need to start doing things the new way. At the same time, when you are with your manager, you do things their way. So you and above do it their way, but you and the people below you, you do it your way, which is the high performing way, right? So that's how I look at it. Nancy, hopefully that kind of addressed it, the constructive possible.
Okay.
Now, within the team, if the team leader it's not willing, then it can be very challenging within the team. So a lot of time we say you need to work with team leader. Perhaps one of the considerations is this. And okay, I'll cover this in the next slide, Nancy. I'll cover this in the next slide. All right, so let me move on. Now, one of the things that we talk about team is, so just now we noticed in terms of the relationship. Let me kind of summarize it. And what I've done over the last, maybe the last 5-6 years, is I've actually looked at all the different leadership models, a lot of different team models, as well as my experience working with team and consulting. And there are 6 things that organization wants to do in order to make sure the team has high performance. If you look at the model that we have created, the center of it is results, which is the goal. So whenever a team comes together, the question, do we know the goal or only the leader knows the goal? That is the first thing we need to clear. And everything else that makes a team high performing is in the pursuit of the goal or in the pursuit of the result. So where we are coming from is, if every team members are made to focus on the team results, they will become high performing over time, right? Now, what do we mean by result? The commitment to the team result is not about commitment to my own KPI or my own task. Is, do your team members know what this team want to achieve? Do your team members know, if we achieve this, what is the benefit of it? If we achieve this, how it's going to make the company better? So team members have to know that. The challenge is, a lot of the time team leader assume team members have this. How do I know that? Whenever I run a team development program and we ask the team leader tell me, Isaac, my team member knows. Then when we run a facilitation session during our program and we say, so what is the goal of this team? What are the things that the team needs to do? Everybody just look to the team leader. And it's funny, because then the team leader said, guys, I told you already. And then we realize the communication tends to be one way. So that's one. The second one, sensing, and you don't find this in other leadership model. In other team model. Now, sensing is the ability to notice changes that will affect the team and its result. Now, this, in the older model, we tend to assume that leader does this. In a self-managing team or in a high-performing team, every member does this. So, for example, let's say one of your team member, let's say your production, and one of your team member has a friend in quality. And when they are talking, the quality guy told him that, hey, actually we heard CEO plans to do this. And then you realize, hey, if they do that, it kinds of conflict with your team goal. Then you bring back to the team and talk to the team leader and say, I'm hearing this from the other person. What do you think? Is this going to affect? Now, sensing also means the team leader will now check with the senior leadership and say, we understand that this is happening. Is this true? If this is true and it conflicts with our team goal, do we need to revise our team goal? So in a high-performing team, changing the goal is accepted and normal. What's important is for the team to recognize why the change is required. So sensing is a critical part, because it's the one that allows the team to navigate and be fluid in the way they move, right? In the old team model, we don't do sensing, because the assumption is, if the boss asks us to do, we should just do and just keep quiet, because they have their ideas. In a high-performing team, we always want to check back. We don't assume that the management has considered everything, because as you realize, as change happens, there are so many things the management have to consider. Sometimes they actually forget what they told you, which means it could be a situation, they started your project, you run it, but along 3 months later, they are doing something else and they actually forgot your project is running. So when they do it, it actually conflicts with yours. But if you don't tell them, then what happens is two projects will be fighting for same resources, right? And guess what? The newer project might get the resource because it's fresh on the mind of the CEO. So sensing is important. Third, responsibility. Take ownership of their task. Now, you notice one of the things that happen in normal team is when a person does something and they hit roadblock, sometimes they tend to just keep quiet. In a high-performing team, a person takes, when they hit a roadblock, they will try to figure a way around it. That's one. Secondly, when you ask them, why do you do it this way? They are able to explain it to you exactly why they have done it this way and why not the other way. And this is very important, because sometimes when you ask team member, why do you do it? They just say, don't know. Or they will just say, you told me to do, right? But in a high-performing team, that doesn't happen. What happens is the team member will check with you. You asked me to do it this way, but I think doing the other way is better. So the two-way communication becomes very, very strong. Now, the fourth one, conflict. And I indicate it as courage to voice and deal with differing opinions and views. The Asian community or the Asian culture has never been comfortable with conflict. We have viewed conflict as as something that's negative towards relationship. So you notice sometimes people bring up something and then there's a bit of fighting. We say, okay, never mind, never mind, never mind. Let's take it easy. We don't address the situation, we pacify it. Now, the problem with that is it creates unhappy team members. So in a high-performing team, conflict is actually welcome, because why? Every one of us have a point of view. And we never know that one point of view that could actually change the whole team. If the person don't speak up, it's going to affect the whole team. So conflict needs to be encouraged. When we say conflict needs to be encouraged, it's not purposely having conflict, but the conflict is because team members want the team to be better. So that's the premise of it. Now, alignment. Now, this alignment is interesting. Alignment means if say there's 5 team members and everyone doing different parts, we actually know who's doing what, that's one. Secondly, we actually know if the person didn't do his part, what's the effect into my job? Or if I don't complete my part, how is it going to affect others? Now, what's the outcome of that? If the team is aligned, let's say I'm going to delay, I can't complete today, I'll complete tomorrow. I will know if I complete tomorrow. So 1 day delay, I know the next guy will have to delay 1 week because of this 1 day delay. In a normal team, I just do my part. So if I delay 1 day, I just do delay 1 day. I'll just maybe talk to the team leader. But in a high performing team, if I know what I'm going to do delays you, I will actually come to you and say, hey, I got this problem. How and it's going to delay. Is there any way we can manage it together, or I have no other choice, or who else can help me? Then what happens? This person may actually say, okay, why don't you call the other person? Let's have a small team meeting to see how we help you. That is what we mean by team alignment. And this is where really makes a high performing team wow. Because the team members are working among themselves. They don't need a team leader to step in all the time. In a team that is normal, right? You realize we always go to the team leader and the team leader has to figure out everything. In a high performing team, even with the team leader away, the members are able to resolve their issues. And that's what makes it amazing, right? And the final part, trust. Now, trust here is interesting. It's not about I trust you or you don't trust me. One of the biggest challenge in a culture where relationship is high, whenever somebody say, hey, you don't trust me, we keep quiet because, it's sensitive. Over here, trust focus on willingness to be vulnerable, which means if I don't know how to do it, I will tell you, okay, I'm sorry, I don't know how to do it. Now, it sounds easy, right? But a lot of time we are afraid to do that because of people's opinion of us. Why? Because we do not feel safe in such environment. So in a high performing team, while we have conflict and we fight, and we know we fight because it is to improve the results, we also have this sense that we are looking out for each other. That if somebody don't know something, we will help the person. And therefore, we actually feel safe telling people that we don't know. Because if I can tell you that I don't know, I will get support. That's one. If I can tell you I don't know, at least it doesn't jam up the entire project. Because you notice sometimes when a person don't know something and they dare not tell people, what happens is they delay the work. And then when they delay to the point that it cannot be delayed, and when the leader confront them, they actually say, I don't know. And that's what happens in some teams that don't communicate. So these are the 6 factors that we have developed, and I found it to be one of the reasons why I developed this team model, because I find it fits the Asian culture, the relationship culture a lot better. All right.
Isaac,
Yes.
coming to that model, is there any specific reason why you put trust at the outer layer? Is it according to the sequence towards the result?
So if you think about, yes, so the way I put trust at the outer is it holds everything together. For example, if alignment, right? If I don't have trust, I will share very little information. I won't share everything. I will tell you I'm delaying by 1 day, but I will not tell you it's delayed by 1 day because I messed up something, right? So trust is an emotion. So the way we design this is a trust is a feeling. So if you don't feel safe, that means there's no trust. If you feel safe, then there's trust. So you can have all the 5 components, but without trust, right, the team will not come together. That's why we put it as the outer layer to hold everything together. Okay, hopefully that helps you. That
Okay.
all right. So for me, I came from a technical background. When we developed this model, one of the things was we developed a diagnostic tool, because people will say, Isaac, how do I know I'm a high performing team or how am I not a high performing team, right? So we actually have a diagnostic model, almost like a 360 survey for the team to give us a sense what are the behaviors that team needs to improve in order to achieve these 6 capabilities, right? Now, so this is just a bit of what we do. If you are interested in terms of developing teams, let us know more about this. Right, and the final part on this, which is you can't be high performing by just talking about it. A lot of companies say, oh, we want to be high performing, and then they send them for workshops. Now, the thing is this, if you keep sending people for workshops, for training, or you make them read, they will not be high performing, because high performing is like a muscle. The more you work on it, the stronger the muscle will be. And the way we do that is, if you want a team to be high performing, you need to be putting them into projects where they need to learn to solve problems, they need to make decisions, because these are very high stress activities. But because of the high stress activity and the realization we need to improve, that's how they become high performing, right? So this is something that I want to share, because I find there's a trend of sending people for high performing workshop, but there isn't a practice. What I would recommend to organization is, you want to send people for a high performing workshop, great, but make sure when they come back, there is a project for them to work. Because when they start applying, it's as if you are lifting weights. You will start to beginning feel a bit of pain because the muscle is now stretching, but over time your muscle will build and you become high performing. So you cannot be high performing by just attending workshops. In a way, I'm shooting myself in the feet, but that's the truth of it, right? Um, let's go back to our Mentimeter, right? And so then, and this part is really about finding out challenge. So now let's talk about the challenge of a high performing scenario, right? Okay, hold on, yeah. Okay. Now let's go to your Mentimeter again. And for this Mentimeter, I would like you to the same one. So go to menti.com, key in the same code 3673935, 3673935, and answer the question, what challenges do you face in problem solving in team setting? Now we are talking about what are the problems you face. Earlier on, we talked about the contrast. Now we talk what's the problem, right?
Okay, so we are waiting for participants to give some feedback on this.
Oh, I like the
Challenges.
first one. Problem statement not clear. I think that is excellent.
Yes. I think they are used to all the tools of problem solving.
Yeah. Now, once again, the tool is the what. I find the challenge is sometimes the how, right? The people are not using it correctly. Yeah. Or sometimes we are too fixated with tools, like which is the best tool. No, the irony is, right, any tool will work as long as you are applying it.
Yeah. I think the bottom line is that we make it objective and not through the subjective discussion you will end up with no results and so on.
Correct.
So yeah.
Correct. You're so right. Where everybody wants to be the boss. So sometimes we have a culture in a team where the loudest voice win, right? So those who talk loud will tend to dominate, will have their answers or their suggestions taken up. So that happens. Symptom not correctly identified or saying great. So once again, a lot of the comments here tends to be like, gives me the impression that not everybody has a voice. Only 1 or 2% have the voice. And therefore, the symptoms are not correctly defined. The problem statement is not clear because the team leader may think it's clear, but it may not be clear for everybody. All right. No transparency, lack of communication and trust. Actual pain scenarios not certain among team members. So great. Once again, communication. The team leader tend to assume people know and assume people know why it's important. Timid member afraid to raise questions, great. So this talk about the team members. And as I shared, it has to do a fair bit of culture issue, right? Clear communication, how do you execute? Now, once again, when we talk about clear communication, it's interesting because I run effective communication workshop, and sometimes we assume the same word means to the same everybody. So for example, when we say, hey, respect, my idea of respect can be quite different from your idea of respect. Right? For me, respect means everybody follows the rule. For you, respect means if the person older or the person more higher rank gets to do what they want. For example, this whole day about 3 days of COVID, right? You notice it's because of position. There's a different treatment to it. Lack of skills. Now, lack of skills, great. So once again, we talk about what are the skills. Today, I'm going to talk with you 2 particular skills. One is the problem solving, the fishbone diagram, and the other, the weighted decision making. And I found these 2 has been pretty helpful to some of the people I've trained. Getting people to listen, great. Once again, when we take things too personally, we don't listen. Because why? We are afraid if I listen to you, means I have to agree with you. I'm not sure how many of you can relate to this point. I have worked with some individuals where Their assumption is that if I agree with your point, that means if I understand your point, I understand what you means I have to agree with you. Now, that is a very dangerous assumption, because if that is your assumption, then you will purposely choose not to agree with the person, because you are afraid if you try to understand them, you have to obey them. So that's the reason why sometimes people don't listen. Members not giving full cooperation, and this talks about engagement. This also talks about, are we respecting every members, right? Reluctant to participate in new tasks because the available staff is commonly around. So this talks about sometimes no chemistry, and therefore just now I say in a high performing team, we actually put the I like you, or you like me aside. So you need to be able to be clear that not everybody you need to like. Manager don't listen to team members. This talk about insecurity. Leader tends to jump to selecting correction action job properly. Once again, this also I will share a bit when we go to the next point, in terms of both the team and the team leader has a part to play in this. Everybody's responsibility, but mine is why I take it as a situation that, you're talking about the other person, they blame everybody else but themselves. It's a challenge when I have to oppose my leader's decision. And perhaps one of the ways we talk about is, how do you manage your team leader? It's not easy, but it's doable. No proper action plan, because people assume what everybody is supposed to do. In the end, people start pointing fingers. So once again, I would suggest some of these things can be addressed if you take up a project management workshop. It will help you with the tools part. Okay, thank you so much. No transparent. You notice a lot of this communication, a lot of this interaction, right? A lot of this interaction.
Yeah, I think we have two participants keep putting their hands up.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I think it is also, you can write the questions or opinions at the chat box, or in the questions space, where I can actually deliver the opinion or questions to Mr. Isaac, because we have to go on with the session.
All right, yeah.
We kind of running out of time. Okay, so therefore it is better you put it in writing, then I can just give it to Isaac.
Yeah.
Right.
So once again, please put your question in the chat box or the Q&A, and I'll do my best to address it. Now, if you can't, at the end of it, I do have an email, so you can always write to me for personal, because it's challenging trying to address the whole crowd. Now, you notice I mentioned in terms of there are two main factors, and you guys have showed that to me. Firstly is the team leader. Secondly is the team. Two parts. Now, from a team perspective, you need to recognize everything goes through a cycle. The reason why I highlight this is, whenever I work with a team where the focus on relationship, nobody wants to accept, people find it hard to accept that there is a way to develop people, because people feel if there is a technique, it's manipulative. Now, studies have been done, and this is called the Tuckman Teams Development Model. It was done in the 70s. And what he realized, in any team when they come together, they go through this cycle of forming, storming, norming, performing, finally adjourning. Now, what it says is this, and this is a very good way to use it as a diagnostic to know where your teams are, right? So I say the problem your team faces gives an idea of current stage. If your team leader is not comfortable with conflict, then what happens is, and they try to classify, then what happens is, when your team goes into a storming stage, what you realize is the focus, the anger will grow till a point that people cannot take, then the team explodes. So either the team leader gets it, or team leader change, or somebody in the team tends to start to take direction. So one of the things that you notice with this is, which stage are you start? Are you start at the storming stage, or are you at the norming stage? The reason this is important is, if your team realize where you are at least they know, okay, we are normal. Most people want to know that they are normal. Nobody wants to be abnormal, right? So what can we do by us knowing this? Firstly, whenever you come to team, now this is a public domain information, please share this with your team and get them to realize where they are at. At the forming stage, everybody wants to have a good impression. So everybody try to be nice. And that is normal. When people start to be difficult, it's not them showing their true color. It's just normal human behavior, that when you are new with someone, you put on your best behavior. All of us does it. So that's where forming comes in. So it's important. Now, how do we get teams to work on this? You cannot skip the stage. In a team development cycle, what we are saying is, you must go through this entire stage. but you can speed it up if you want. So one of the ways we help teams to speed up is get to know each other's strengths and weaknesses. So team comes together very quickly. This is my strength, these are weaknesses. I use a psychometric tool to be able to help team to quickly understand their strength, their weaknesses, as well area of potential conflict. So I actually do that. So we use this profiling tool, and then we actually get them to realize, oh, okay, in the area of decision making, both of you may have an issue. So when we do that in a fun way, people are already conditioned or at least prepared that when something happens, they realize it's not the person purposely doing it, but because their personality. Now, in order to grow your team, you also want to set ground rules for the team. Once again, the Asian way of communicating, we tend to assume people should know. That's why you hear people say this person should do this or they shouldn't do this. Now, when you set a ground rule, you have to be explicit. So one of the things that I do with my team of consultants is I will tell them, if you don't give an idea and something goes wrong, you are equally to be blamed because you didn't give a suggestion. My job as a leader is to make the decision, but I can only make a decision based on the input I have. So if you don't say something and I make a decision without your input, then you are partly to be blamed. And I realize when I communicate that, people become more willing to share their thoughts. And finally, create a psychologically safe space for everyone. Now, generally in Asia, we like to tease people. We are very sarcastic without realizing some people are actually affected. So when people say something and we make a joke out of it, people feel that they're being criticized. And therefore, after a while, some team members keep quiet. In that situation, we say it's not safe. The person doesn't feel safe. Feeling safe means creating an inclusive team. That means even if you're the most senior member, you are treated.
Hello?
Sorry, I think I got disconnected just now, is it?
Yeah.
All right. So are we back again?
Yes, I
Okay.
think so. You can share
Okay.
again.
Right.
Okay.
So this was I was sharing in terms of the team, right? Now, it's important about team leader, and this is where sometimes I think leaders in themselves doesn't feel safe in the team. Why? Because if you look at the slightly the older mindset, a team leader or team leader or manager always feel they must have all the answers. Now, that is not a useful way of thinking, right? So that's one thing happens. Now, the other reason why a team leader is not able to function effectively is because this whole Mr. Nice Guy thing. They want to be liked. Remember, relationship focuses on niceness. Then the overemphasis of feelings over results. So you also notice sometimes the leader do not know how to manage some strong personality in the team because they don't want to rock the boat. So for them, they try to juggle hati with everybody to the point that it affects the results. Now, there are also leaders, and we're talking in terms of how leaders are contributing to the problem. They don't let everybody talk because they don't know how to respond. So they prefer a one-way communication because it makes it easy for them to talk because they don't know how to reply if team members ask something that they are not prepared for because they are afraid of looking stupid. So that's happening. Feel the need to prove them as leader. The other thing is about self-esteem. Some leaders feel they must prove themselves to others, so they feel the way to do that is to dominate. And the last thing, team leader takes things very personally because when they see a problem happening, they feel, or when they hear members talk about it, they feel that they are not doing properly. So these are some of the things that happens with the team leader itself. Okay, so very quickly, and these are just very quick tips. Once again, you complete the survey at the end of the session. I will send you this PowerPoint so you have all these quick tips in terms of, you need to have leader know their role. Their role is not to come up with the decision. Their role is to achieve the objective, set the tone for inclusivity. So if you have team members who are different or weird, it is your job to make sure everybody feels inclusive. You need to deal and manage the conflict uh, in a transparent manner and don't sweep it under carpet. In some situations, you need to settle the conflict with the staff or with the team members. Then in the main group, you need to share that there's a certain thing happened, that thing have been resolved, right? Without going to the details, because you need to balance between not embarrassing the team member and making sure the rest know that there's nothing hidden. Transparency actually increases trust in the team. Communicate consistently and continuously. Some people tell me, I said I'm an introvert, so I don't talk. Now, once again, high-performing team is not about you. High-performing team is about making sure the team comes together, which means if you're an introvert, then you need to improve your communication skill because continuous communication is important. Why? Because changes are constantly happening. So that's why it needs to happen. And finally, take care of members and members will take care of the task. Which means in a high-performing team, if your member is not performing, you need to push the member to perform. It is not that you do it for them so that they are not stressed. What you need to do is you need to push them. So as you push them, you care for them. How do you care for them? Giving feedback, encouraging them, having one-on-one, taking down and having a coffee, sit down and say, hey, what's the issue? Let's talk it through. That's why you need to be caring for them. If you start settling your members' issues, then what happens is you're actually handicapping your team members because you are not strengthening them. And what happens is you end up spending too much time with them that you don't care for the rest. So as a team leader, you need to be very clear. If the member is supposed to do the job, then your job is to push them to do it. It's not to do it for them. Right. So that's generally the construct of a team. Right. And if we do this, if you are able to bring your team to be high performing, then the problem solving and decision making becomes very simple. Right. So very quickly in terms of problem solving, you want, firstly, 4 steps problem solving is actually very straightforward. Firstly, recognize the problem, which is the what factor. Now, the other things that people don't do is impact of the problem. We need to be able to get the team to recognize the impact of the problem. So, for example, people don't follow COVID procedure. So we say that's a problem. But if we assume everybody should know why, then that's dangerous, because for some people say, maybe just the boss wants everybody to follow, because why? If not, ministry will come to check. If not, why HR will get in trouble? Now, that may not be the real impact. The real impact is it affects everybody, right? So it's important to do that. And then you need to identify the cause, and that's where the fishbone comes in, and finally fix the problem. So let me kind of just introduce you to this and share with you why this is important and why I think this is probably one of the, I think it's a fabulous tool by itself. Now, the fishbone diagram starts really in terms of identifying problem. Now, let me kind of tell you the benefit first, then I'll go into the individual explanation. Why I find the fishbone diagram is a great tool for a team problem solving, right? Now, when I say team problem solving, means everybody needs to be talking to each other. It reduces bias. So if I have a team of 5 people and I come and say, I think the reason why we're having a lot of quality problem because machine A is the issue. Now, maybe that's just my perspective. Because why last time I used to be the engineer at a particular line. But now what I need to do in order to reduce bias, I need to get everybody to speak out. So as a team leader, I need to institutionalize the fact that, okay, do y'all see the problem the same way? So that's how you reduce bias and also create inclusivity. The other part with this tool is visual. Because it's visual, right, we get to see if anything is missing out. And therefore, it's holistic. And finally, increases ownership. If we do this together and I get input from different team members, everybody gets to say that, oh yeah, this part also affects the product, that part also affects. So everybody takes ownership of project. Because if it is just me as a team leader says this is a problem, then everybody will just say, we just listen to whatever the leader say because this is his problem. This is not the team's problem, right? So there's this illustration that talks about, you have 6 different people touching different parts of elephants and they come up with different conclusion. What does that mean? Firstly, we need to recognize as an individual, as an adult, as a working adult, we all have our own perspective, right? If you were to see your boss with another lady walking into hotel lobby, you will have your perspective. Now, whether correct or not, we don't know, but you will have perspective, right? Compared to another friend who's sitting in the hotel lobby, seeing both of them coming in, they have different perspective because of what they see. So what we are saying is it is important in a high-performing team that we give everybody a voice, even though we may not like them, even though we may have different values or different perspective, it is important to hear why. Because if we want to increase ownership of team members in a team, we need to ensure that they speak up. Because when they speak up, as I put here, people take ownership for things that matters to them, they will become more committed to solving the problem. And that goes to my original point of results being the center of any team. If everybody knows what they need to achieve, then they will work together stronger. So let me kind of quickly just show you how to use this in a very simple way. So in a fishbone diagram, the problem statement is there, and somebody just now talked about problem statement not clear, right? So obviously we talk about the how do you construct that. Now, if you look at this, the Ishikawa diagram is a cause and effect diagram. So what we are saying is this problem happened. What are the factors that contributes to it? Now, the original ones have 6 points. Firstly is when there's a problem, we say, does the manpower factor affect the problem? Second, method. So method also talk about process. Is the problem because of the process? Is it a situation people didn't follow the process? Or is it a situation people follow the process and we create this problem? Right? Then machine, so equipment. Is the machine maintained properly? Was the setting done correctly? So you want to talk about the machine, right? Is the machine contributing to the factor? Then you talk about measurement. Are we measuring the right thing? For example, are the equipment we use to measure the quality calibrated? How long was it calibrated? Was the tolerancing that we use for measurement realistic, right? Are the upper limits, lower limits realistic? Or do we need to relook? Because maybe the product is okay, but because we make the tolerance too tight, we get higher reject rates, right? A material, is the material in good condition or is the material itself defected, right? And finally, Mother Nature. So Mother Nature is a category that we put for anything that we can't consider. So if you think about in today's context, COVID situation will come under Mother Nature. So why I say this makes it reduces bias. It forces the team to consider all these factors, which are all the factors within an organization wherever you talk about problem solving. Now, what if you don't have this diagram? Then what happens is the leader will come, the leader will say, I think it's a machine problem, right? And then if anybody talk, they say, yeah, but this is more important. So it becomes biased because it is based on the leader's opinion. But when you do this, it generates conversation for everybody to input into that. Now, common challenge when you're using this diagram is members are not sure why is this problem a problem. It could be just my boss thinks it's a problem, but I don't think it's a problem, right? That's one. Secondly, problem not clearly defined. So, for example, saying COVID affects people are not following COVID's procedure. It sounds like a problem statement, but it's not a complete problem statement because question is, are we saying the whole organization is not following it or is it particular department? Are we saying it that it is not being followed every day or certain days? So you want to have your 4W and 1H in your problem statement, how frequent it happens, when it happens, who is affected, who is creating problems. So you want to build that up. Now, please Google for how to create a problem statement because that's going to benefit you. Now, member fears of saying something wrong. I find this a lot in manufacturing, where if I'm production, you are quality, I may be reluctant to ask you or to suggest something to do in quality department because you will be upset because in your mind, Isaac, your production, who are you to tell me what to do in quality? Right now, I notice that happens very much in manufacturing, where you only speak up on something that you know. And therefore, one of the challenge which Dr. earlier on you asked me about rigid teams and high performing is we don't cross boundaries, which means if that's your problem, you settle. I won't say anything. Now, this is in fact, this affects a lot of problem solving. What we are saying in a high performing team, you want people to voice out their idea, even though it's not their department, even though it's not their area of scope, right? Because member fear of saying things. Member fear of stepping into another member's territory, similar to what I've just shared. Now, keep quiet because don't want to take additional workload. Once again, if you don't include your team member, they will keep quiet because they don't want to highlight anything that will affect them. So this is what happens in a problem-solving context.
Isaac,
Yeah.
this tool sounds very engineering. I know you were engineers. I mean, our audience out there, they are also from different sectors.
Yes.
Is it applicable to any sort of businesses rather other than engineering?
Actually, it does because I also do service consulting where we do customer experience. Now, maybe the words are changed. For example, when you talk about measurement, you talk about customer satisfaction or satisfaction index, right? When you talk about machine, you talk about your services. So, for example, let's say in consulting, we talk maybe one department focus on data gathering. So you can put now, which means these 6 M's is basically a label. You can put any other label into it. For example, if you are in services, let's say you are you are providing a service, let's say Grab Food, let's say you are in a delivery service, right? And there's a problem. You can say, is it a situation of call center's issue or vendor issue or the delivery person issue or the equipment of the delivery person? You can actually do this. What's important with this is you want to label possible factors that can contribute. So in that sense, this model is flexible. You can use for anything. It's just the category. Now, one of the ways I notice some teams do is without the 6M, what they do is they say, okay, what are the contributing factors? So they just label, they just throw out the ideas, and then they do what we call affinity diagram. They tend to group everything into a category. So the technique is usable for all kind of work. Thanks for bringing that up, Doctor.
Okay. And previously they also have 4M, right? And then they
Yes,
actually
correct.
have 6M and so on in the manufacturing environment.
Correct.
Yeah.
4M was like the man, machine, material,
Yeah.
money.
Method. Yeah.
Method.
Okay.
Yes, correct.
Right.
Okay. So now, so let's say, so what happens in using the fishbone diagram is when you do this, right? Then and as a team you analyze. So let's say we talk about people not following COVID. Then we ask about the manpower. Are people aware of it? Why are people not following? Right. So you want to come out with the factors. Then we say about method or what we call process. Do people know how to scan in or how to follow the process? Is the process defined easily to follow? Is the process practical? So you want to come out with all the bullet points. Or equipment. So machine, we talk about equipment. Are people not taking temperature because they don't know where the machine is, or the machine is broken, or the machine is not accurate? So we talk about machine. So you want to go step by step for everything, every factor. Now, after you do that, right, in order to do problem solving, you want to look at even factor and you want to categorize. Is this factor something that is controllable? Which means if I do these things, we can solve this issue. For example, if the machine is spoiled, is that controllable? Now, machine spoil is not controllable, but machine being replaced is. So you want to prepare for it. Then the next one is not certain, which means I'm not sure. Can this thing be controlled? So I'm not sure. So if not sure, then the approach is the team has to think of, okay, maybe we need to do a bit of experimentation to find out whether we can control it or not control it. If we can control it, to what extent we can control it. And the final one, cannot control. So for example, the person having COVID, you cannot control. But the person not interacting with other people, that means the instruction being, you must just go home and you cannot go out from the house, that is controllable, right? So if it is not possible, then you need to find a way to go around it. So these are the interventions based on how you categorize. Now, once again, this, you can use voting, you can get everybody to speak out. The most important, every team member must have an opinion. So that is how you do problem solving using this model. Okay, so this one is it's a simple tool, but I think it's useful because the key point here is every members get to speak out. It requires every member to share their perspective of the situation, as well as allows them to contribute their skill, right? Because if everything based on the team leader, then it will be based on what the team leader know about the team members. That's one. Secondly, it based on whether the team leader likes the team member or not. You would see situation where the team leader may not use the best team member because they don't want the best team member to outshine them. That also happens, right? So, and then moving on. So that's problem solving, right? That means you solve a problem. Now, when it comes to decision making, a lot of times we say we want to make the right decision. Now, making the right decision depends on context. That means at a particular moment. Now, in a decision-making structure, there are many models. One of the common models I use, they call it double diamond, because I do design thinking, so I use that. But I want to just bring up to this point. When you have to do decision-making, first thing is you must be clear the problem you want to fix. One, or is it a situation you want to make it better? So we need to be very clear. Fixing a problem or making it better, that's very somebody mentioned keep quiet because don't want to take additional workload. It's true, right? Because why? people are not being involved. People don't feel inclusive. What I would say is this: if you as a team member feel that your opinion and your values and your thoughts and suggestions is being considered seriously, you are more committed to the project. You don't mind doing extra work. People don't mind extra work. People mind when the work is just for show, right? Okay, sorry, just a bit digress. Now, the other thing is be clear of priorities. When I talk about be clear priorities, whenever you are doing decision making, you need to know what we call CTQ. Is the main priority cost? Are we trying to reduce cost, or is the main priority on improving the quality, or is the main priority on shortening the time to do it? So what we call the CTQ factor, right? Is the priority of this project on cost saving, or is the priority on this project about improving the time taken, or is the priority in this project is about improving the quality? So you need to know that. Then third point in decision making, be clear of the boundaries and limitation. Now, this is very general because our audience is broad based. When we talk about being clear of boundary, which means, for example, if you have a budget of 100,000, then you need to be clear, folks. We have a budget of 100,000. What we need to do we only have 5 days to solve it. So you need to give the boundary so that your team members can run. One of the biggest problem I notice is team leaders do not tell the boundary because why? They scared by telling the boundary, people will be demotivated. And the assumption, if people are demotivated, they won't come up with ideas. To me, that's the wrong assumption. You want to give the boundary so people don't feel that their suggestions are useless, right? So tell them the boundaries. So for example, when I run workshops or because I do customized training for my customers, and they say, Isaac, propose us a workshop. My first question is, how many days do you have? And then they will tell me, Isaac, you just tell me how many days you need. But then if I tell you 5 days, you'll have difficulty. And then my customers actually take a step back and then they think about it. And then they'll say, okay, can you do something within 2 days? Now, once they tell me within 2 days, then I do what we call scoping, which is I will design something that works in the 2 days. Now, bringing this to decision making, when you want to make a decision, you want to know what are the realistic parameters, which means how many days you need, how much money you have, who can you touch in that decision making. So for example, and we need to be very practical, certain people you realize you cannot offend, so you need to be mindful. Certain people you cannot push them around, so you need to get everyone in the team to recognize this. Now define what you're working towards. Is your project to create something new, or the decision has been made, whereas your team needs to decide which method to use? So you need to be very clear. Are we deciding on the method, or are we deciding on the outcome? You have to be very clear on this. If you are clear on this, then the team can work together. Now, then we go now, point 5, we generate possible ideas. So this is where generating idea generation, brainstorming techniques comes in. This is where a team leader needs to be familiar with facilitation technique in order to come out to get people to throw in their ideas. And finally, build a plan, right? So let me show a very simple tool. And I use this because for most of us, the decisions are a bit simpler. It's called the weighted decision-making matrix. And this is something it's online, but I'm just going to share with you. So let's say you have your company or your team needs to decide which car to buy, right? Which car to buy for your company. And you need to figure out, firstly, you need to ask yourself, what are the criteria that you have that is required? So in this sense, if you look at my PowerPoint slide, there is 5 criteria: purchasing price, that means how much you pay; fuel consumption, reliability; available space, that means how many people can sit; and the engine power, how strong. So these are the criteria that you set. So you put the criteria on the left, then after that, you indicate the vehicle. So let's say you got Proton, you got Hyundai, you got Honda. So you put exactly what's the model. Now, after you put the options that you have, because decision making is about choosing which option, right? Then you go into the weightage. Weightage talks about the importance. So out of these 6 criteria that you have set, which one is more important? Now, what you do not want to do is to give the same weightage to everything, because that doesn't work. So if you look at this particular example, fuel consumption is the most important factor in the purchase consideration, followed by purchase price. Now, so that's what you notice, right? Then after you are clear about the weightage, then you do the ranking. One of the easiest way to do is voting. That means we get every team members to say, okay, for vehicle A, purchase price on a scale of 1 to 6, what's the pricing? Looking at what's the most important. So they want to rank for all 3 cars. And then after you do the ranking, you notice 5 times 6 is 30. Then finally, the one with the highest score is the obvious decision. So this is a simple tool which allows every team member to put in their thoughts. Without a tool like this, usually either the team leader's suggestion is taken care of or the one with the loudest voice. So this is the step-by-step of identifying it. All right. Wow, we are done.
Just we have 4 more minutes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I'm just go to the chat box here.
Yep.
We have a response from Norliana, which is talking about something which is I think this is it is really happening. You know, when you actually raise up something, people will say that, oh, you suggest, okay lah, you buat lah. So it's kind of you throw out something and it turn out to be your additional works. I think it's a culture among the, maybe to say that is not a high performing team that you define lah. So I think
so if I made this one, right, actually the issue with that is perspective. It's not the culture. For example, if you highlight it, why would I give it to you? Because it actually makes sense. Because the reason you highlight it means you have a personal interest in it. So if you have a personal interest to it, it makes sense that you drive the project. But so that is the rationale behind why if somebody suggests, we tell them to do it. It's not because we want to shut them down. But if our perspective is, if I voice out, I will have to do extra work, obviously I don't want to bring it up. But if the perspective is, if I voice it out and I'm given the opportunity to do it, obviously I can. Now, what's important is, from a management perspective, you need to be able to reward people for solving problems. The problem is, a lot of times we are not rewarded because reward is seen as a recognition. So doctor, imagine if you highlight a problem and I say you run it, and at the same time, I'm telling you, if this project is done properly, you will be rewarded either in terms of some kind of incentive, but you will get that. I think you'll be okay doing it, right?
I think other people also will actually, try to bring out something new because of that motivation.
Exactly. And maybe the caveat here is, if you bring up and you bring it to completion, that means you bring out the idea and you work at it and your team achieves the result, then you will be rewarded. I think people are okay. I think what people don't like is when they bring out an idea and what the leader does is in a way to shut the person up by saying, you do it now. If that is the scenario, then obviously nobody will bring up ideas.
And then the other, I think it's very interesting, Norliana bring up, they want to accept because of this high education level. With a different level of education background, it brings to different level of acceptance and when it comes to opinion.
Agreed. In fact, I noticed sometimes the more highly educated, you tend to do more logical thinking, but you need to recognize, you need to balance between logical thinking and empathy or emotion when you're dealing with the people. And that's where communication is very critical. Leaders need to learn to constantly communicate with people, to be able to create a sense of acceptance, a sense of caring. That means inclusiveness. The challenge is sometimes people who are highly educated will say, you don't understand. In fact, that is not very helpful in a high-performing team. In a high-performing team, if I'm going to say something, I will take the effort to try to explain so that you understand. Yeah.
Okay. I hope I'm not one of them. Right. Okay. I think that's all time we have, Mr. Isaac.